I'm Paul.
I'm Devin.
Together, we're Dads and Dice, two new dads who like to play some games during our free time.
That's right, and today we are going to be reviewing Viticulture by Stonemaier Games. Viticulture Essential Edition is a worker placement game in which we will be making wine, fulfilling orders, receiving visitors, and all that running a vineyard really is. Viticulture is played over a series of rounds, and it's really a race to 20 points. The first to 20 points, you finish that round, and whoever has the most points wins. It is played over the series of several rounds, and each represents a year that goes by. So you start off with spring, in which you decide you're waking up, your turn order, everybody kind of bids on a track. The higher you go, the worse the rewards are, but you get to go earlier all rest of the year. Whereas the lower on the track you go, the better the rewards are, but you're most likely going to go last throughout the year. Once you move into summer, you really begin the actual worker placement phase, and it's one of two actual worker placement phases throughout the game. The board is split in half, and the left half is the summer spaces. And here you'll be doing things like receiving some visitors, drawing vine cards, giving tours, planting your vines, and various building, things like that. After you've done that and decided to pass, and all players have passed, you have an in-between fall phase where you draw some cards and prepare for the winter side. And then when you move into the winter side of things, it is the right half of the board in which you will do things like receive the winter visitors, harvest your fields, crush those grapes into making wine, fulfill wine orders, train new workers for the next year, and various things like that. So you'll do those actions until everybody passes that, and then the round begins again and you start a new year from the next spring.
Yeah, so we've both played this game a handful of times. First time I played it, I want to say was 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And really from that first playthrough, I'll be honest, it really didn't click with me that well. We tried it again during the pandemic. We played it on Tabletop Simulator. And again, I just don't think I really understood it that well. This time around, I really did feel like it clicked a little bit more with me. Like Devin mentioned, the board is split up into two sections. I think that's one of the best parts about this game. Just the fact that there's the summer board and the winter board, and you have to be really cautious of when you're done with that season. If you go too heavy in the summer, you're not going to have enough workers to do your winter round. If you do too much in the winter, you can't do too much in the winter. I guess you can. You can do too much in the winter and then not really get what you wanted, right? Like, you might just have to take that 1 lira that really doesn't do much for you.
Yeah, so the opposite of Paul here, in that this game really hit for me from the beginning. I played this game when it first came out, when that was 2014, 2015. And honestly, I have probably played it, I'm going to say roughly 15 to 20 times total. I've played it at all sorts of player counts. I've really actually played it. It's 1 through 6. I played it at everything but 5, and I've honestly always enjoyed it. To me, it is a top tier worker placement game. Honestly, I think it's one of the best worker placement games. It does that so well without being just totally basic. And not to hate on a game like Stone Age or Lords of Waterdeep, because those are good games, but Viticulture, there's enough game in it that I just really enjoy. And you talking about the summer and the winter phases, I love that aspect so much of knowing when I need to overextend and I'm going to use most of my workers during summer, or when to, I really need to hold because I need to get the winter stuff done. And there's a lot of times a very clear switch as the game progresses. A normal game is going to finish somewhere around the 7-round mark, 6 to 8, I would say. And in that time, the beginning rounds, it's all about summer, and it's all about planting and what you can do there, and then building. And then once you get to those later rounds, it's winemaking, and mastering that and getting the orders fulfilled. And so I don't know. I really enjoy it. Every single time I've played this, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I was super excited to be able to review this game because, like I mentioned, it didn't really click with me the first couple times. What I really like about this, first of all, it's the Mama and the Papa cards, right? I think that is an awesome way to start the game. It's a variable setup. You might get a card that gives you a building. You might get one that just gives you more money. You might get an extra worker. So it does kind of start you off on a different point than everyone else, and it kind of guides your playthrough a little bit, right? You might have that windmill that allows you to score points every time you plant a card. The cottage, which will give you more of the Summer of the Visitor cards. You might have the tasting room that allows you to gain victory points every time you give a tour. So I really do enjoy that aspect of it, and I really do think that it gives you a good starting point. One thing that I find kind of frustrating, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit, I do think the game is pretty luck dependent. And the reason I say that is just because you may get a visitor card that says, you might get it early on, that allows you to do something and allows you to get a victory point for everybody else that does that action, right? Like the one that I can think of is get a victory point for everybody that builds a building. Well, if you get that late in the game, you're not going to get that victory point because at that point, the buildings will be done. You might get something, if you get that one early, you'll get a ton of victory points. So just the random kind of drawing of the cards kind of gets me a little bit. I know you can mitigate it just by drawing more cards. I know the cards are very important in the game, but just that randomness kind of doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, so I can definitely see that point of view, and I definitely see how people think that way and feel the randomness. I think a lot of that comes from play style. My personal play style would be more of, I'm going to draw these cards and I'm going to form my strategy off of what these cards are. And that's just the way that I typically play things, right? I'm going to see what I get, and then that's going to be, I'm going to see how to take advantage of this, right? If your play style is, this is what I'm doing, and I need this card to do that, or this card helps me, or this card doesn't help me with it, then it's luck, right? It's, I'm doing this strategy, this is the path I'm taking. I draw a card, that doesn't work for me. I draw a card, that doesn't work. I draw another, there we go. That one I score a lot of points because I was already doing this strategy. And so it's a way. So if you're that style of player, which is, there's nothing wrong with at all, you're going to feel that luck. You're going to be like, I went really heavy on red grapes and all I'm drawing is white wine fulfillment cards. Whereas me, a lot of times I find I don't even really pay much attention to my fulfillment cards until way into the later rounds. I'm drawing them because really I'll harvest a whole bunch of grapes. I may not even turn them into wine until I start drawing cards, and then I have enough grape choices to decide what I want,
And that was one thing that I did notice with playing from you was, I want to say by the third round, you had already had your small cellar and into your medium cellar of the different grapes, the reds, the whites, and then at that point, that's when you started getting the order cards, right? Because you already had a storage, you had already stored some wines, and you could just say, okay, well, with this one, I'm trade this one and this one and this one. You already had that backup there, right? So, yeah, I agree with what you're saying, because for me, it was, all right, I'm going to get this card. Okay, now I have to make the wine to match this card. And at that point, like you said, the game is a race. At that point, it's already too late to be able to plant them, to harvest them, to turn it into wine, to age the wine. And that, like you said, that should be done early.
Exactly. So let's talk about, what do you think about the playtime of this?
So I think it's good. I've played it at solo, 2-player, and I've done 4-player as well. Playtime, it's about what the box says, 45 to 90 minutes. Solo play, I think, is a lot closer to the 45-minute range. I was able to knock out a lot of them kind of in a row. This uses Automa Factory like all other Stonemaier games, and I think it does a decent job at trying to replicate the randomness of a player. One thing we mentioned about that is it might be a little too random, but I think the time consistency, I think it's fine. 2-player, what did that take us? I want to say maybe like 70 minutes, an hour 10, an hour 15, something like that. It fits squarely in that time. I forgot we've played this at 6 players before, and that one did take a little bit longer. I think it bothered me a little bit more than it bothers Devin, but it's nothing outrageous for a 6-player game.
Yeah, so I find the time, well, and it's hard for me because I can stay engaged in a game even when it's not my turn. And I know a lot of people can't do that, which that's fine. So personally, I can not really be a good judge of, oh man, that game was quick for me when everybody else felt like a drag whenever it wasn't their turn. So I don't know. I think the player time is fine. Going into the different player counts, because as I said, I've played at everything but 5 players. It's very interesting because more spaces open up every 2 players, right? And so the game is a very tight worker placement game, and it's still tight at the 3-player mark. But it has this thing where at the 2 players, the game's very tight, and then 3 happens and you open up double the spaces. And so now it's actually not as tight until you get to the 4-player mark, and then it becomes very tight again. And I would assume 5-player, that's the one I haven't done, does kind of the same thing. It opens up more spaces again, and then the 6-player becomes very tight as well. And so even at 6 players, I remember it was very much where you woke up and what space you got the bonus action on. Yeah. And I think going back to the bonus action, I personally, after playing it at so many player counts, I think the 2-player is for sure the worst player count. And not that it's bad, it's still a tight worker placement game, but the 2-player is the only player count that completely lacks the bonus actions for being the first to go to a space. Because they open up on the 3-player game, and they're actually still available in the solo game. So 2's the only one that misses out, and I actually think that I enjoy those bonus actions and the strategy of, okay, so I really need to build, but Paul went to the build first. Well, I need to take advantage of a bonus action on drawing twice the grapes or something like that instead of just following him and then letting him take another bonus one. And so 2-player missing that, it just, I don't know. I personally wouldn't get this game if I was solely a 2-player person.
Yeah, I completely agree. First time I played it was with you at 6 players. And then after that, I played it solo. So to me, the bonus rounds were normal, or the bonus spots were normal. The solo does it a bit different. You get one of the little glass beads and you put it on the spring, the selection of where you want to go. And then you just collect that bonus and you can use it at any time. But then when you and I played it 2-player, I was really wanting that bonus. I want to be able to sell my field and collect a victory point when I do that. I want to be able to do the tasting and get an extra coin or get an extra visitor or play an extra visitor. And that was just lacking, and I really wanted just a little bit more. And like you said, it's still a very tight worker placement game. It makes you have to compete for those spaces, but you just want a little bit more.
Yeah. You've mentioned the solo several times. I have played this game solo. It's not my favorite solo. And I play quite a bit of solo games. Unfortunately, can't always get together and always play with a group. So I play solo fairly often. A few times a week I'm soloing something. This game it's okay. It's completely fine. Again, I would not buy it for the solo. So if you're, let me say 1 to 2 is your primary gaming group, yourself and a spouse or a significant other or something like that, maybe not quite the game. Now, if it's your, I get together with 4 people all the time, I definitely highly recommend that. But the solo, it didn't quite hit the mark for me of being like, oh, this is a great solo. It was just, because the game is a race and because you get 7 rounds, truthfully, I find it, I guess, easy to just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to make it to the 7-round mark. There's really not this huge challenge. And I understand they actually add the aggressive mode or whatnot, but it's still, I think is not all that hard or difficult. So I don't know. It's just the solo is not totally for me.
To me, once I figured out how to beat the solo, it became very methodical. It kind of became just like okay, well, I have to go here, 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 and here. And yeah, it might block me, but I know I can do my bonus if I have those still. Or, it just felt kind of more like a puzzle. And once you solved it, it's kind of solved. And then you go to the more aggressive variant, and then you just kind of work to solve that. And then you can kind of just do that over and over because, it's a set amount of rounds. You know about what you can do. And then, like you mentioned before we were talking, was sometimes you'll have 3 meeples cover some actions, and then on one side and 2 on the other, so 5 spaces are blocked. And then on the next year, you might only have 2 spaces blocked. So, again, this game came out 7 years ago. Solo has come a long way since then. So, I'm sure if it were to be re-implemented or anything like that, it might be better, but it is what it is. And, it's a solo. There's a solo.
But honestly, I feel like we've said some negatives about various things, like the 1-player, 2-player, whatnot. But I think it's a great game. Again, if you have a gaming group you play with 3, 4, 5 players, this is a great game. There's a reason that it's highly ranked and talked about so many years later. Again, I think for me, it's one of the top just worker placements. And we didn't quite touch on the theme.
Well, so I was actually going to mention that a little bit. I didn't realize that the artist for this was Beth Sobel, same person that's done Cascadia. Actually did Verdant, that's about to come out. Great artist. I don't think this theme really hits for either of us. We're not wine people. But what I do think the theme does is it does make it pretty accessible to a lot of people, not necessarily in the board game world. It hits on something that a lot of people are interested in. It's very cute, very pretty, very relaxing to look at. So I think the theme makes it more accessible than what a game is, right?
The theme is not for me. I don't really care much for wine or whatnot, but I actually think the theme knocks it out of the park when it comes to relating it to the gameplay. Everything makes sense and is very intuitive. You are planting grapes. You are then harvesting those grapes onto crush pads. You are then using those crush pads to make wine. You're then taking that wine to fulfill orders.
And mixing the wines to make your blushes and your sparkling wines.
Yeah, so I think the theme truly does actually knock it out of the park. For me, not even really caring much about wine. I don't care about Tuscany. I just don't care much about that theme. I still really enjoy that. I enjoy the fact that, I'm planting my field, I'm harvesting, I'm doing these things, and I feel that, right? I don't know. It's done very well. Even the extra side actions, I'll call, you're giving a tour, right?
Yes.
You're training a new worker for the next round. The side things really add to it. And really, I think it does it really well.
It's because the game you're running a vineyard, right? It's not necessarily just winemaking. It's running the vineyard, and that includes all the other stuff. One other thing that I'll say about this, it's the inserts. I absolutely love the inserts in this, right? It has a spot for everything. It even has spots for the expansions in there. So that alone, you can get it out, you can get it to the table quickly, and then just be playing within a few minutes of getting the box off of the shelf. The theme also makes it very easy to remember the game. You don't have to go through the rule book and look at every little thing here and there because, like you said, it makes sense. In the summer, you do this. In the winter, you do this. And you haven't played the game in years. And when I came over, you're like, oh, yeah, I know exactly how to make the wine, right? It was just so intuitive. And I really do think that's because of the theme of the game.
Yeah, I actually think you're absolutely right because it had been years since I played this, and I needed I'm going to say maybe a 60-second refresher
Yeah.
of the order in which things happen or whatnot.
Which is on the board anyway.
Yeah, it's on the board. But then, when it came to the wine, I know how to make the wine. You plant, you harvest, you crush. Like, it just, I knew that part of it because you're right. It's absolutely the theme. So,
overall, I mean, I think Viticulture is a great game. I don't think it's a great game for me. I will play it. I understand why people like it. I understand why it's in the top 50 of BGG. It just, there's something about it that I can't get over. I've heard a lot of people say add the Tuscany expansion, add this and that. In reality, I don't really want to add an expansion to a game that I don't really like necessarily at first. Again, it's a great game, and I don't want that to sway you from it. Everything about it is great. I just don't think it's for me.
Yeah, which is perfectly fine because on my hand, it's, I think, a great game that I will play anytime anybody ever busts out because I think it is great and fun.
Yeah. So, other than that, that's all we got. We want to thank Stonemaier Games for sending us this review copy of Viticulture. We really do appreciate it. That's all we got. Remember, like, comment, subscribe. All that stuff really does help us. That's all we got.
All right. We'll see ya.
I'm Paul.
One more time.
I'm Paul.
I'm Devin. And we got to redo that because I definitely was like looking funny.